HOA President Delilah Crankshaw just handed my lake cabin keys to her spoiled son, Braden. Picture this. I'm watching through binoculars as this woman dressed in a pristine white tennis outfit that probably costs more than my monthly pension grabs a bright red sledgehammer and starts demolishing my hand-carved dock railings. The sound of splintering wood echoes across the lake like gunshots. Braden, her 28-year-old failure-to-launch son, is literally filming it on his phone, whooping like he's at a demolition derby. But here's what made my blood boil. They're destroying the memorial plaque Uncle Mortimer installed for my late Aunt Clara. Each hammer blow sends chunks of engraved bronze into the murky water below. The smell of disturbed lake mud mixes with the acrid scent of Delilah's designer perfume as she sweats through her tennis whites. Before I tell you how my 40-foot revenge tower landed them both in federal prison, what would you have done? Where are you watching from? My name's Thaddeus Brennan, Thad to my friends, and 3 years ago I inherited the most beautiful piece of lakefront property you've ever seen. Uncle Mortimer left me his 2-acre slice of heaven on Crystal Lake, Michigan, complete with a cozy cabin that's been in our family since 1987. The old man knew I'd appreciate it after spending 30 years swinging hammers on construction sites before a falling beam crushed my left leg and forced an early retirement. This wasn't just any cabin. Mortimer had spent decades turning it into a craftsman's paradise. Hand-hewn log walls, a stone fireplace you could roast a whole pig in, and a wraparound porch where you could watch the sunrise paint the lake gold every morning. The smell of cedar and pine still lingered in every room, mixed with the faint aroma of the pipe tobacco Mortimer smoked until the day he mysteriously drowned, just weeks before he was scheduled to meet with the county prosecutor about irregularities in our new HOA. I'd been living my dream retirement, rebuilding the dock with my own hands, installing solar panels, crafting furniture in my little workshop. My modest pension and disability checks covered the basics, and I finally had the peace I'd been chasing my whole life. The sound of loons calling across the water at dusk, the texture of smooth dock planks under my bare feet during morning coffee. This was what I'd worked 30 years to earn. But everything changed when Crystal Lake's new Homeowners Association elected their first president. Meet Delilah Crankshaw, a 52-year-old real estate predator who makes a piranha look cuddly. Picture designer activewear stretched over a frame that's never done an honest day's work, driving a BMW that gleams like fresh blood in the morning sun. She owns Crankshaw Property Solutions, one of those vulture companies that circles struggling properties, then swoops in for the kill. Delilah lives in a 6,000-square-foot glass palace on the North Shore with her lawyer husband Preston and their professional disappointment of a son, Braden. This kid's 28, has an MBA gathering dust, and somehow convinced the state to give him a real estate license despite having the business acumen of wet cardboard. Word around the lake is he's never closed a deal that mommy didn't hand him on a silver platter. Here's where it gets interesting. Braden had been eyeing my property for 2 years, claiming my rustic cabin was blocking the view from his childhood bedroom window. Apparently, a grown man still living with his parents deserved an unobstructed lake view more than the guy who actually earned it. 5 years ago, Delilah convinced enough newcomers to form our first ever HOA. She ran unopposed after her only challenger, elderly Mrs. Patterson, suddenly decided to spend more time with family after someone slashed her tires and left dead fish in her mailbox. Classic suburban terrorism with a smile. The association started small. Just basic maintenance standards, they promised. But I watched 3 families get squeezed out in 2 years. The Hendersons, who'd lived here since the 70s, suddenly faced $20,000 in septic violations and sold to Crankshaw Property Solutions for half their home's value. The Kowalskis got hit with dock safety violations until they gave up and moved to Florida. Each time, Delilah's company swooped in as the helpful buyer offering cash for quick sales. Then came my turn. I'll never forget the morning she showed up at my door, designer heels clicking on my wooden porch like a death march. The artificial sweetness of her perfume couldn't mask the stench of greed radiating from her pores. "Mr. Brennan," she announced, not bothering with pleasantries, "your property has been identified as diminishing neighborhood values." She thrust a violation notice at me thick enough to use as kindling. $15,000 in required improvements due within 90 days, or I could sell to the HOA for their generous assessment of $89,000, half what lakefront property actually costs. "And if I refuse?" I asked, already knowing the answer. Her smile could have frozen hell over. Daily fines, Mr. Brennan. $200 a day until you comply. Don't worry, we'll help young Braden relocate you somewhere more appropriate. That's when I realized this wasn't about property values. This was about stealing my home for her spoiled son. The war had officially begun. 2 weeks after Delilah's threat, the harassment machine kicked into overdrive. First came the certified letters, so many my mailman started giving me sympathetic looks. Each envelope contained fresh violations more ridiculous than the last. My septic system, which I'd upgraded just 6 months earlier with all proper permits, was suddenly non-compliant with enhanced environmental standards. My boat dock, built precisely within property lines according to the original 1987 survey, now allegedly extended 6 inches into community waterway space. The real kicker? My small woodworking shed, the one I'd built with county permits and proper inspections, was now classified as an unauthorized commercial structure because I'd sold exactly 3 handmade birdhouses at the local farmers market. But here's where it gets interesting. I'm not some pushover retiree who rolls over for bureaucratic bullies. 30 years in construction taught me to read the fine print and check credentials. My old foreman used to say, trust but verify, especially when someone's holding a clipboard. So when Delilah's certified surveyor showed up with his fancy equipment and clipboard, I did what Uncle Mortimer always taught me. I asked to see his license. The guy's face went white as fresh snow. Turns out Mr. Professional Surveyor wasn't licensed in Michigan. Hell, he wasn't licensed anywhere. A quick call to the state licensing board revealed this guy sold insurance in Ohio and had about as much surveying experience as my neighbor's golden retriever. The taste of victory was sweeter than Aunt Clara's apple pie. But wait, it gets better. Remember Delilah's HOA compliance officer who'd been prowling around my property taking photos for evidence? That official-looking guy with the badge and clipboard documenting my alleged violations? Yeah, that was Braden wearing a costume from Amazon and carrying a laminated fake ID he probably made on his mom's office printer. The kid couldn't even spell compliance correctly on his homemade badge. The smell of fraud was thicker than the morning mist rolling off the lake, and I was about to blow it all wide open. I spent the next week playing detective with the determination of a man protecting his home. Uncle Mortimer's old construction contacts helped me understand something crucial. Any legitimate HOA rule changes require a 2/3 majority vote with proper written notice to all property owners. Most states have similar requirements, but HOA bullies count on homeowners not knowing these basic protections. Filing formal complaints felt like swinging my carpenter's hammer again. Each document was a nail in Delilah's coffin. County complaint about unlicensed surveying, filed. State licensing board report about fake compliance officers, submitted. Photo evidence of every fraudulent inspection, organized and time-stamped. But my real breakthrough came when I discovered Delilah's enhanced environmental standards and aesthetic improvement requirements had never been legally voted on. She'd simply declared them into existence like some suburban dictator, hoping nobody would check the paperwork. Dutch Kowalski at the marina confirmed my suspicions when he pulled me aside one morning. The smell of diesel fuel and lake water mixed with his nervous sweat as he looked around like a man sharing state secrets. "Thad," he whispered, "that woman tried the same thing on us 2 years ago. Claimed our marina permits were invalid, demanded $30,000 in upgrades, offered to buy us out for peanuts. We only survived because my nephew's a lawyer and caught her in lies." "Why didn't you warn anyone?" I asked, though I already suspected the answer. Dutch's weathered hands shook as he poured coffee. "She threatened to report us to the EPA for imaginary fuel spills, said she had connections who could shut us down permanently. We kept quiet to keep our business alive. That's when the full scope hit me. This wasn't just harassment. It was organized crime with a Homeowners Association logo. 3 other families shared identical stories. The Hendersons, the Kowalskis, and the Garcias had all received the same boilerplate violation letters, faced the same impossible deadlines, and been offered the same lowball buyouts from Crankshaw Property Solutions. The pattern was clearer than fresh lake ice. Meanwhile, Delilah escalated like a cornered animal. Daily fines jumped to $350, retroactive to my first violation. Her lawyer husband, Preston, sent a cease and desist letter threatening to sue me for harassment if I continued interfering with legitimate HOA business. The irony was delicious. A woman running a criminal enterprise was threatening to sue me for exposing her crimes. But my ace in the hole came when retired federal judge Wellington Thorne knocked on my door. This distinguished gentleman had been watching the lake's drama unfold from his seasonal cabin, and when I showed him my evidence, his eyes lit up like Christmas morning. "Mr. Brennan," he said, adjusting his reading glasses as he studied my documentation, "this woman has violated about 15 different state and federal laws. The question isn't whether we can stop her, it's how much prison time she's looking at." The sound of Delilah's BMW pulling into my driveway no longer made me nervous. Now it sounded like opportunity knocking, and I was ready to answer the door. Delilah's next move was straight out of the dictator's playbook: call an emergency HOA meeting when most working people couldn't attend. Tuesday at 2 p.m., because apparently lake emergencies only happen during business hours. The community center reeked of desperation and cheap air freshener as only 12 of our 47 property owners shuffled into folding chairs that squeaked like dying mice. Most faces belonged to Delilah's inner circle, wealthy retirees who'd moved here from the suburbs and treated our lake like their personal country club. Delilah strutted to the front wearing a navy blazer that probably cost more than my monthly pension, her heels clicking on the linoleum like a countdown timer. She'd prepared a PowerPoint presentation because nothing says legitimate crisis like Comic Sans font and cheesy slide transitions. "Ladies and gentlemen," she announced, voice dripping with artificial authority, "we face a crisis of community standards that threatens everyone's property values." The slides flashed doctored photos of my cabin, my dock, my shed, all digitally enhanced to look like disaster zones. She'd added rust stains, exaggerated normal wear, and somehow made my sturdy hand-carved family sign appear ready to collapse. My property looked like a horror movie set, when in reality it was better maintained than half the McMansions on the lake. "These substandard conditions require immediate intervention," Delilah continued, laser pointer dancing across fabricated damage. "I propose an emergency assessment of $25,000 per non-compliant property for lake preservation and community safety." Here's where things got interesting. I'd hidden my phone in my jacket pocket, recording every fraudulent word something Uncle Mortimer taught me after dealing with crooked contractors who'd promise one thing and deliver another. The vote was pure theater. 8 yes votes, 4 no votes, with Delilah casting the tiebreaker. But when I reviewed that audio later, I discovered her masterstroke of electoral fraud. She'd announced votes from people who weren't even present. "Bob Martinez votes yes," she declared confidently, except Bob had moved to Arizona 6 months ago. "Susan Finley agrees with the proposal." But Susan was working her nursing shift at the hospital. 2 of her yes voters had already sold their properties to Crankshaw Property Solutions, but somehow retained voting rights in Delilah's mathematics. The meeting minutes she filed with the county contained completely different numbers, 15 to 2 in favor with overwhelming community support. The woman wasn't just corrupt, she was sloppy about covering her tracks. Time for my counterpunch, and Wellington helped me make it count. We organized a legitimate HOA meeting with proper 30-day notice to all 47 property owners. Saturday morning, when working folks could actually attend, I spent that month hand-delivering flyers explaining basic homeowner rights. Every construction project I'd ever managed taught me that communication prevents disasters. The packed community center that Saturday morning smelled like fresh coffee and righteous anger. 23 property owners showed up, more than had attended any HOA meeting in 5 years. Faces emerged from hiding like flowers after a long winter, ready to reclaim their community. Dutch stood first, his weathered hands steady for the first time in years. "I've got something to say about what's been happening around here." The stories poured out like water through a broken dam. The Hendersons, forced out by fabricated septic violations. The Martinez family, harassed until they sold under duress. The Finleys, facing daily intimidation until they fled, yet somehow still voting in Delilah's phantom meetings. Mrs. Pembroke dropped the nuclear bomb. At 83, she was sharper than most people half her age and madder than a wet hornet. "That woman came to my house with cash," she announced, voice carrying like thunder, $5,000 to vote against anyone who opposed her. When I refused, she said accidents happen to old ladies who don't cooperate. The room exploded. Murmurs became angry voices. Angry voices became demands for justice. The taste of community solidarity was intoxicating like breathing mountain air after years in a polluted city. Our vote to remove Delilah as HOA president was decisive. 19 in favor, 4 opposed. Democracy had returned to Crystal Lake, and it felt like sunrise after the longest night. But here comes the mini twist that changed everything. Just as we were celebrating, Delilah's BMW screeched into the parking lot. She burst through the doors like a woman possessed, face red as fresh blood, designer purse clutched like a weapon. "This meeting is illegitimate," she shrieked, pointing at Wellington. "This man doesn't even live here year-round. He can't organize HOA business." Wellington smiled like a chess master revealing checkmate. "Actually, Mrs. Crankshaw, I've been researching your HOA's legal status. Would you like to explain why your incorporation documents were never properly filed with the state?" The color drained from Delilah's face faster than lake water through a broken dam. She'd built her entire empire on an HOA that legally didn't exist, and now we had the evidence to prove it. The war had just escalated to a whole new level, and for the first time, I was winning. Delilah's response to losing her presidency was like watching a rabid raccoon backed into a corner. Dangerous, unpredictable, and absolutely unhinged. She refused to acknowledge our vote, claiming it was an illegal coup orchestrated by outside agitators. Outside agitators? We were talking about Wellington, who'd owned his cabin for 15 years and paid more in property taxes than Braden had earned in his entire worthless life. But Delilah's desperation led to her boldest fraud yet, convincing sheriff's deputies she had a legitimate court order to seize my property. The sound of gravel crunching under police cruisers at 6 a.m. would have terrified most people, but 30 years of dealing with crooked contractors had given me a nose for legal bullshit. "Mr. Brennan," the lead deputy said, looking uncomfortable as he handed me official-looking paperwork, "we're here to execute a property seizure for outstanding HOA violations totaling $31,000. I sipped my morning coffee still hot with that perfect bitter bite that sharpens your thinking while examining documents that looked legitimate but smelled fishier than Dutch's bait bucket. The letterhead was right, signatures seemed real, but something about the case number made my construction-trained eye twitch. "Deputy," I said calmly, "would you mind calling your supervisor? I think you've been handed fraudulent paperwork." 10 minutes later, those same deputies were apologizing profusely and driving away red-faced, while Delilah's court order turned out to be typed on Preston's law firm letterhead but never filed with any actual court. The woman had forged federal documents and convinced law enforcement to do her dirty work, a felony that would make her previous crimes look like parking tickets. But while the deputies were discovering they'd been duped, Delilah was already executing her nuclear option. I returned from grocery shopping to find my own front door fitted with shiny new deadbolts and yellow, condemned, health hazard signs plastered around my property like toxic waste warnings. The audacity was breathtaking. She'd literally broken into my home and declared it uninhabitable while I was buying eggs and coffee creamer. Here comes the beautiful twist that would destroy her completely. What Delilah didn't know was that Dutch's marina security cameras captured the entire illegal operation in crystal clear high definition. The footage showed her and Braden cutting my original locks with bolt cutters, installing new hardware, and posting fake government signs, all while wearing matching Crankshaw Property Solutions t-shirts like the world's dumbest criminal uniforms. But the real kicker? The timestamp showed they'd started their break-in exactly 37 minutes after the deputies left, proving they'd used fraudulent legal documents as cover for premeditated burglary. Wellington's voice carried pure prosecutorial joy when I called him. "They've just committed breaking and entering, fraud, impersonation of government officials, and now we can prove conspiracy. I'm filing federal charges within the hour." But first I had a more immediate problem, and a golden opportunity. The taste of righteous revenge was sweeter than Uncle Mortimer's maple syrup as I live-streamed myself cutting off Delilah's illegal locks with my own bolt cutters. "Good morning, Crystal Lake," I announced to my phone camera. This is what happens when HOA Karens think they can steal other people's homes. That video exploded across social media like a fireworks finale. Within hours, #CrystalLakeJustice was trending nationally. Local news vans circled the lake like vultures, and my simple act of reclaiming my property became a symbol of grassroots resistance against corrupt authority. Meanwhile, Delilah was weaving her most elaborate fiction yet, claiming my Uncle Mortimer never legally owned the property due to deed discrepancies dating back to 1987. She produced historical documents proving the original sale was invalid, making me nothing more than a squatter on rightfully owned Crankshaw land. The paperwork looked convincing, artificially aged paper, fake notary stamps, backdated signatures created by someone skilled in document forgery. For about 6 hours, I actually worried she might have found a legitimate loophole. Then her idiot son handed us the smoking gun. At Mickey's Tavern downtown, Braden's alcohol-loosened tongue started bragging to anyone who'd listen about getting rid of old losers who don't belong on our lake. The bartender, who'd watched this drama unfold with growing disgust, started recording when Braden revealed their master plan. "We've used this strategy on 6 other lakes in 3 counties," he slurred into his craft beer, apparently forgetting that bartenders have excellent hearing and smartphones. "Mom's got connections in county planning. We force out the trash, build luxury resorts, triple our investment. These blue-collar morons never see it coming until they're homeless." That recording became the foundation of what would soon become a federal RICO investigation spanning 4 counties and involving 127 victims. The community response was like watching sleeping giants wake up. 35 property owners signed support petitions, contractors offered free labor, and a crowdfunding page hit $23,000 in 2 days. Even better, 3 other lake communities contacted us all facing identical Crankshaw schemes. Delilah's local scam had just become a federal crime syndicate, and the FBI was very interested in our evidence. Wellington's late-night phone call came 3 days after Braden's drunken confession hit the local news. The retired judge's voice carried an excitement I hadn't heard since Christmas morning as a kid finding the perfect gift under the tree. "Thad," he said, barely containing his glee, "you need to sit down for this discovery. My legal research just uncovered something that makes Watergate look like a parking violation." I poured myself a whiskey Uncle Mortimer's favorite brand that still burned like liquid truth, and settled into the old leather chair that still held the lingering scent of his pipe tobacco and righteous anger. Outside, the lake reflected moonlight like scattered diamonds, peaceful and unaware of the bombshell about to explode. "Lay it on me, Wellington. Lay it on me." The Crystal Lake Homeowners Association was never legally established. Preston filed the incorporation paperwork incorrectly in 2018, and it was never corrected. For 5 years, Delilah has been running an elaborate fraud scheme using a completely fictitious legal entity. The implications hit me like a 2x4 to the skull. Every rule, every fine, every forced sale, all based on an organization that legally didn't exist. It was like discovering the IRS was actually 3 kids in a trench coat. But Wellington wasn't finished wielding his legal sledgehammer. "It gets better," he continued, papers rustling like autumn leaves in a windstorm. The county clerk revealed Preston bribed her predecessor to lose the original incorporation documents. Margaret Hoffman, the previous clerk, died in a suspicious car accident 3 months later, right before she was scheduled to meet with state investigators about corporate filing irregularities. My blood turned colder than lake water in January. Margaret Hoffman was the same clerk who'd helped Uncle Mortimer research property records before his mysterious drowning. She was also the woman who'd promised to help him expose illegal HOA activities. "Wellington," I said, my voice steady despite the rage building like steam in a pressure cooker. "Uncle Mortimer was meeting with the county prosecutor the day after he died. Are we looking at murder? I'm saying the current clerk found evidence in Margaret's hidden files suggesting systematic document fraud across multiple communities. 3 other HOAs Preston established have identical filing errors, and in each case, original property owners faced mysterious accidents or sudden health crises forcing quick sales. The financial scope was breathtaking. Delilah's fake HOA had collected $847,000 in illegal fees over 5 years. Another $312,000 in fraudulent penalties extracted from residents too scared or broke to fight back. But the real money came from property theft. 23 lakefront homes acquired for 40% below market value, then flipped for obscene profits. Here's where karma showed her sense of humor. Wellington's research revealed that Delilah's own glass palace, the mansion with the supposedly precious view, was built illegally on protected wetlands without permits. The EPA investigation shows their septic system has been polluting Crystal Lake for 8 years, Wellington explained, his voice carrying the satisfaction of a man watching justice unfold. They're facing $2.8 million in environmental cleanup costs and mandatory demolition of their entire structure. The irony was sweeter than fresh maple syrup. Delilah had terrorized law-abiding property owners about imaginary violations, while building her empire on actual environmental crimes. But the most devastating revelation came when Wellington discovered security footage from Dutch's marina showing Preston's Mercedes parked near the lake access road the night Uncle Mortimer drowned. The timestamp proved Preston was there during the exact window when my uncle allegedly fell from his dock. "Thad," Wellington said, his voice heavy with the weight of truth and the promise of justice, "your uncle died trying to protect this community. He discovered their entire operation was criminal, and they killed him to keep him quiet." The taste of justice was bitter and sweet simultaneously, like strong black coffee mixed with revenge honey. Uncle Mortimer hadn't just suspected fraud, he'd been murdered to protect a criminal conspiracy. Now I had the evidence to finish what he started, and Delilah's precious view was about to become very, very expensive. The morning after Wellington's revelation, my cabin transformed into a war room that would make Pentagon strategists jealous. Coffee percolated like liquid determination while we assembled what Dutch started calling our Lake Justice League. Wellington arrived first, carrying legal briefs thick as phone books and wearing the satisfied expression of a prosecutor who'd just been handed a signed confession. Behind him came Sarah Martinez, an environmental lawyer from Grand Rapids who specialized in wetlands violations and had a personal vendetta against developers who poisoned waterways for profit. "When I heard about your case," Sarah said, spreading EPA documentation across my kitchen table, "I called in some favors. The federal prosecutor handling environmental crimes wants this case badly. Apparently, Crankshaw Property Solutions is on their watch list for similar violations across 3 states. Our dream team kept growing. Marcus Webb, a forensic accountant who looked like a mild-mannered librarian but dissected financial fraud like a surgeon, volunteered to trace every dollar that had flowed through Delilah's criminal enterprise. Dr. Jennifer Hayes, a local journalism professor, arrived with her investigative reporting students, eager to document our fight for a documentary that would expose HOA corruption nationwide. But the most important addition was Dutch, who organized what he proudly called his Lake Restoration Volunteer Army, a collection of contractors, boat captains, and weekend warriors who'd been waiting years for someone to stand up to the Crankshaws. "All right, people," Wellington said, adjusting his reading glasses like a general planning D-Day. "Here's our multi-pronged attack strategy." The legal assault was beautifully simple. Step 1. Void all illegal HOA actions retroactively, since the organization never legally existed. Step 2. File federal RICO charges for organized property fraud spanning multiple counties. Step 3. Civil lawsuit for treble damages and property restoration for every affected family. Step 4. Environmental crimes prosecution for the wetlands destruction. Step 5. Bar discipline proceedings to strip Preston of his law license permanently. Marcus explained the financial recovery in terms even Braden could understand if he'd been sober enough to listen. "We've identified $4.7 million in fraudulent profits sitting in frozen Crankshaw accounts," he said, spreadsheets covering my dining table like evidence at a crime scene. "Under federal asset forfeiture laws, every penny goes back to the victims, plus punitive damages." But my personal mission was something more satisfying than money: the tower. I'd spent weeks researching county building codes with the thoroughness Uncle Mortimer had taught me: measure twice, cut once, and always check the fine print. Michigan law allowed structures up to 40 feet without special permits, provided they met basic safety requirements and didn't violate aviation regulations. My design was brilliant in its simplicity: a multi-purpose observation tower that would serve the community while delivering poetic justice. The structure would feature weather monitoring equipment connected to the National Weather Service, a bird-watching platform endorsed by the local Audubon Society, and an amateur radio repeater serving emergency communications for the entire region. "But here's the beautiful part," I explained to Dutch while we reviewed construction plans. "The tower will be positioned to completely block the view from where Delilah's mansion used to sit, if it hadn't been condemned for environmental violations." The timing was perfect. Construction would begin during Delilah's fraud trial, with each tower section representing victory over a different Crankshaw scheme. Community work parties every weekend would build solidarity while creating evidence of grassroots democracy in action. Sarah had taught me something crucial during my construction career: always verify environmental compliance before breaking ground. The EPA fast-track system requires detailed soil testing, wetlands impact assessment, and wildlife habitat evaluation, she explained. But since your property has been in family hands since 1987, you're grandfathered in for most restrictions. Dutch coordinated the volunteer labor with military precision. We've got 12 contractors donating time and equipment, he announced, checking his clipboard with obvious pride. Heavy machinery operators, electrical specialists, concrete crews. This tower's going up faster than Delilah's blood pressure when she sees it. The psychological warfare element was my personal favorite. The tower would be painted in bright, cheerful colors visible from 3 miles away. Solar-powered LED lights would illuminate it at night, not pointing at anyone's property, of course, but impossible to ignore. Weather monitoring equipment included wind chimes that sang across the lake during storms, and the rotating beacon on top would flash every 30 seconds like a lighthouse of justice. Local support exceeded our wildest expectations. The hardware store donated materials at cost. The diner provided free meals for construction volunteers. Even the bank president, who'd been quietly furious about Delilah's property manipulation schemes, offered low-interest loans for any improvements we needed. But the real genius of our plan was the publicity strategy. Number sign Crystal Lake Tower started trending on social media before we'd poured the first concrete footer. Local news crews planned weekly progress reports. A documentary film crew from Detroit requested exclusive access to chronicle the entire construction process. This isn't just about blocking someone's view, Wellington said as we finalized our plans. This tower represents something bigger, proof that ordinary people can fight back against corruption and win. The smell of fresh lumber would soon mix with lake breezes. The sound of construction would echo across water like freedom's anthem. And Delilah's precious view would become a monument to justice. Delilah's desperation reached new heights when she realized her empire was crumbling faster than a sandcastle at high tide. Out on bail and facing federal charges, she hired what Dutch charitably called discount thugs to sabotage our construction site. The first sign of trouble came when our lumber delivery disappeared overnight. $2,000 worth of pressure-treated posts and beams gone without a trace. But Dutch's security cameras caught the whole operation. 3 college-age kids in a pickup truck, loading our materials like they were running their own midnight lumber yard. Those idiots, Dutch chuckled, rewinding the footage for the 3rd time. They left the truck's license plate clearly visible in the LED floodlight. Amateur hour. The license plate led straight to Braden's fraternity brothers from Michigan State. Apparently, the boy genius had recruited his drinking buddies for a cash job without mentioning it was felony theft. When the sheriff's deputies showed up at their apartment, the stolen lumber was stacked in their backyard like evidence at a crime scene. But here's where Delilah's plan backfired spectacularly. Under questioning, the kids immediately flipped and revealed she'd offered them $5,000 cash to make the construction problems disappear permanently. They had text messages, recorded phone calls, and even a photo of Delilah handing over cash in the McDonald's parking lot. The next morning brought a fake OSHA inspector who looked about as official as a carnival barker. This guy claimed our construction violated federal safety regulations and demanded we shut down immediately, except he couldn't explain why his OSHA identification was laminated with a Home Depot laminator and misspelled administration. Wellington's background check revealed the imposter was actually Preston's cousin Eddie, a used car salesman from Toledo who'd driven up for a quick $1,000 payday. When real OSHA officials arrived to investigate, they were so offended by the fake inspection that they fast-tracked our legitimate permits just to spite the Crankshaws. Meanwhile, our community security volunteers had organized 24-hour shifts guarding the construction site. Mrs. Pembroke brought thermoses of coffee that could wake the dead, while Dutch installed motion sensor lights that turned night into day whenever someone approached our materials. The smell of fresh coffee mixed with sawdust and determination as our volunteer army worked around the clock. Retired electricians ran power lines, weekend carpenters cut lumber with precision, and even the local high school shop class showed up to help sand and seal the wooden components. But Delilah wasn't finished with her sabotage campaign. Anonymous calls flooded the county building department claiming our tower would collapse on neighboring properties and interfere with aircraft navigation. The complaints were so obviously coordinated that the building inspector started forwarding them directly to the FBI as evidence of witness intimidation. The aviation interference claim was particularly hilarious, since our 40-foot tower was shorter than most cellular phone towers and nowhere near any flight paths. The FAA inspector who came to investigate couldn't stop laughing when he realized Delilah had filed complaints claiming a structure barely taller than a mature oak tree would endanger commercial aviation. Then came the bribery attempt that finally pushed the building inspector over the edge. Delilah cornered Inspector Rodriguez at the Ace Hardware store, thinking a casual conversation over lawnmower parts would be less suspicious than a formal meeting. What she didn't know was that Rodriguez had been wearing a wire since the anonymous complaints started flooding his office. "Listen, Miguel," she said, voice dripping with false friendship. "That tower construction is really concerning the community. Maybe if you found some technical violations, the project could be delayed until cooler heads prevail. I'd be happy to make a donation to your daughter's college fund, say, $10,000? Rodriguez played along beautifully, asking detailed questions about the donation, while federal agents recorded every word. When Delilah handed him an envelope of cash right there between the fertilizer and grass seed, she'd committed felony bribery in front of enough evidence to convict a dozen criminals. Our tower construction accelerated like a NASCAR pit crew as community support exploded. Local businesses donated materials faster than we could use them. The concrete company provided footings at cost. The crane operator waived his fees entirely. Even the mayor showed up with a ceremonial shovel, declaring our project an example of grassroots democracy in action. By week 3, our tower had reached 30 feet, already higher than any structure on the lake except the cellular towers. The weather monitoring equipment arrived from the National Weather Service in boxes marked Priority Environmental Research, making our construction look official enough to impress visiting senators. Delilah's mansion demolition began the same week, providing delicious irony as EPA contractors in hazmat suits dismantled her glass palace while our tower rose like a middle finger to corruption. The sound of construction from both sites created a symphony of justice hammers building hope on one shore, jackhammers destroying greed on the other. The view from our growing platform already showed the entire lake, and soon it would overlook the environmental cleanup site where Delilah's illegal empire once stood. Every day brought us closer to completion, while every day brought her closer to federal prison. Poetic justice was rising 40 feet into the sky, one board at a time. Delilah's final desperate act was pure arson and stupidity. At 3:17 a.m. on a Tuesday, my security cameras captured her creeping around our construction site like a discount ninja, wearing black yoga pants and carrying a red gas can that gleamed under our motion sensor lights. The woman was literally pouring gasoline around our lumber pile while 847 people watched the live security feed I'd started broadcasting after her previous sabotage attempts. The irony was beautiful. Delilah Crankshaw, HOA president and self-appointed guardian of community standards, was committing arson in real time while hundreds of witnesses documented her crime through their computer screens. But here's where her criminal mastermind plan fell apart faster than wet cardboard. When the fire department arrived, called by 17 different viewers watching the live stream, they found Delilah standing next to the gasoline-soaked lumber pile, holding a box of matches and claiming she was investigating suspicious odors in the area. "Ma'am," Fire Chief Morrison said, trying not to laugh, "you're holding the matches and reeking of gasoline. What exactly were you investigating?" "Someone reported strange smells," Delilah insisted, apparently forgetting that gasoline has a very distinctive aroma, and she was covered in it. "As HOA president, I have a responsibility to protect community safety." The fire chief's response was priceless. "Ma'am, you were just removed as HOA president 3 weeks ago, and this isn't even HOA property." "You're under arrest for attempted arson." Social media exploded faster than Delilah's intended fire. Hashtag HOAKARENARSON started trending nationally as screenshots and video clips spread across every platform. Local news interrupted their morning programming with "Breaking: Former HOA president attempts arson at construction site." By 6 a.m., our tower project had become a symbol of grassroots resistance against corrupt authority. The arrest footage was comedy gold. Delilah, handcuffed and reeking of gasoline, screaming about property rights violations and illegal construction while being loaded into a police cruiser. Her designer yoga outfit was stained with fuel, her perfectly styled hair looked like she'd stuck her finger in an electrical socket, and her face displayed the kind of panic usually reserved for people who'd just realized they'd accidentally live-streamed their own felony. But her arrest created an unexpected opportunity for our construction team. "Boys," Dutch announced that morning, "we're finishing this tower in 48 hours. The whole world's watching now, and we're giving them something to celebrate." Our volunteer army mobilized like D-Day veterans. Contractors worked double shifts, high school students skipped classes to help, with parental permission, and even the mayor grabbed a hammer and started driving nails. The smell of coffee mixed with sawdust and righteous determination as Crystal Lake became the center of a construction miracle. Meanwhile, the FBI raided Preston's law office like it was a terrorist headquarters. They'd obtained warrants based on Delilah's arson attempt, Braden's recorded confessions, and enough evidence of organized fraud to fill a courthouse. Boxes of documents disappeared into federal custody while Preston stood in his parking lot, watching his legal career evaporate like morning mist. The mansion demolition reached its climax the same day Delilah attempted arson. EPA contractors finished removing the illegal structure, leaving only a contaminated hole in the ground where her glass palace once stood. The environmental cleanup crew estimated 3 years of remediation work to restore the poisoned wetlands work that would cost the Crankshaw family every penny they'd stolen from innocent families. Braden provided the final nail in his family's coffin when he agreed to testify against his parents in exchange for a reduced sentence. The spoiled mama's boy who'd helped destroy my dock was now singing like a canary about 15 years of systematic property fraud, environmental crimes, and what federal prosecutors were calling the largest HOA-related RICO case in Michigan history. My parents planned to control every lakefront property in the region, he confessed during his recorded interview, apparently forgetting that betraying your family on federal television isn't covered by any loyalty program. "We targeted elderly residents and working-class families because they couldn't afford to fight back. Mom said it was just business, but I know people lost their homes because of what we did." The community response to Delilah's arson attempt was overwhelming. Donations poured in from across the country, with supporters sending everything from construction materials to homemade cookies for our volunteer workers. T-shirt sales with Crystal Lake Tower of Justice logos funded additional security cameras and emergency equipment. Our tower reached its full 40-foot height on Friday afternoon, exactly 1 week after Delilah's arrest. The American flag we raised at the peak could be seen from 5 miles away, and the weather monitoring equipment was already providing data to the National Weather Service. But the most satisfying moment came when I climbed to the observation platform for the first time and looked out over Crystal Lake. Where Delilah's mansion once blocked the shoreline, native wildflowers were already sprouting through the cleanup soil. The lake sparkled like liquid diamonds under afternoon sunlight, finally free from the pollution that had poisoned it for 8 years. From 40 feet up, Justice had the most beautiful view in Michigan. The 4th of July weekend brought our tower's grand opening ceremony, and Crystal Lake had never seen anything like it. 800 people descended on our community media crews from 6 news stations, government officials in suits who looked wildly out of place at a lakeside celebration, and tourists who'd driven hours to see the Tower of Justice that had become a social media phenomenon. Governor Patricia Whitman arrived by helicopter, landing on Dutch's Marina parking lot like she was visiting a foreign dignitary. She'd come to sign the Crystal Lake Property Rights Protection Act legislation inspired by our fight that would prevent HOA fraud throughout Michigan. The irony wasn't lost on anyone that a local property dispute had triggered statewide legal reform. Our tower platform was decorated with American flags, community banners, and handmade signs reading, "Justice rises 40 feet and views are earned, not stolen." The smell of barbecue smoke mixed with lake breeze as local restaurants set up food trucks, turning our ceremony into the biggest party Crystal Lake had ever hosted. Wellington prepared remarks about property rights and community organizing, while I was scheduled to cut the ribbon and give my first public speech. The butterflies in my stomach felt like they were hosting their own Independence Day celebration, but the sight of Uncle Mortimer's American flag flying from our tower peak gave me courage. That's when Delilah made her surprise appearance. Released on emergency bail for medical reasons. Apparently, attempted arson causes stress-related health problems. She arrived with 3 remaining supporters and what looked like her last functional brain cell. The crowd parted like the Red Sea as she marched toward our ceremony, designer purse clutched like a weapon and face redder than the fire trucks that had arrested her. "This celebration is premature," she shrieked. voice carrying across the water like a wounded seagull. "That tower violates federal aviation safety regulations, and I have documentation proving it's a hazardous obstruction." The crowd went silent as Delilah thrust official-looking papers at anyone who'd take them. Her supporters, mostly her bridge club ladies who still believed her lies, nodded seriously as she declared the tower an immediate danger to public safety that required emergency demolition. "These are authentic FAA documents," she announced triumphantly, waving papers like she'd discovered the Declaration of Independence. "Federal authorities will intervene unless this illegal structure is removed immediately." Wellington stepped forward with the satisfied smile of a prosecutor delivering closing arguments. "Mrs. Crankshaw, would you mind explaining why these official FAA documents are printed on your husband's law firm letterhead?" The color drained from Delilah's face faster than bathwater down a broken drain. She'd forged federal aviation documents using Preston's office printer and somehow convinced herself that nobody would notice the letterhead mismatch. But the real mic drop moment came when Federal Aviation Inspector James Mitchell stepped forward from the crowd. "Ma'am, I conducted the official FAA inspection last week. This 40-foot tower requires no federal notification and poses 0 aviation hazards. The documents you're holding are fraudulent, and creating fake federal paperwork is a felony." The crowd erupted in applause as FBI agents, who'd been enjoying the barbecue like regular festival goers, stepped forward to arrest Delilah for her latest crime. Handcuffs clicked shut while 800 witnesses cheered, cameras rolled, and children who'd once feared the neighborhood bully waved goodbye as police cars drove away. "Ladies and gentlemen," Governor Whitman announced from our tower platform, "this is why we're here today. When ordinary citizens stand up to corruption, extraordinary things happen." Dutch gave an emotional speech about nearly losing his family marina to fraudulent violations. Mrs. Pembroke described years of fear and intimidation that had kept her silent until our community found courage. 3 representatives from other lake communities shared similar experiences, proving Delilah's crimes extended far beyond Crystal Lake. Dr. Sarah Finley, the environmental scientist monitoring our weather station, explained how our tower would contribute to lake ecosystem protection for generations. The amateur radio operator demonstrated emergency communication capabilities that could save lives during natural disasters. Even the Audubon Society representative praised our bird-watching platform as a model for conservation education. The media coverage was phenomenal. Live broadcasts reached an estimated 2.3 million viewers across the region, while social media engagement broke records for local news stories. Number sign Crystal Lake Tower was trending nationally alongside number sign Justice Rises and number sign Community Power. But the most powerful moment came when I finally climbed to the platform and looked out over our lake. The view was exactly what Uncle Mortimer had always described: endless water reflecting endless sky, with shorelines green and clean thanks to the environmental restoration where Delilah's mansion once stood. "This tower isn't about blocking anyone's view," I announced to the crowd below, my voice carrying clearly thanks to the sound system Dutch had donated. "It's about rising above corruption, standing up for what's right, and proving that when communities work together, justice always finds a way to reach new heights." The fireworks that night reflected off calm lake water, painting the sky in red, white, and blue while our tower stood silhouetted against the stars, a 40-foot monument to the power of ordinary people doing extraordinary things. 6 months later, justice had been served with all the trimmings and a side of poetic revenge. Delilah received 15 years in federal prison for organized fraud, environmental crimes, and arson. The judge called her operation a systematic assault on property rights and environmental protection, before adding 5 extra years for the attempted arson that had been live-streamed to nearly 1,000 witnesses. Preston got 12 years for RICO violations and was permanently disbarred, his law degree now worth less than wet toilet paper. Braden, the spoiled mama's boy who'd destroyed my dock with such glee, received 5 years suspended sentence and 2,000 hours of community service helping elderly residents fight HOA abuse. The irony of forcing him to protect the same people he'd terrorized was sweeter than fresh honey from our tower's bee observation boxes. The federal court ordered $12.7 million in restitution to 127 affected families across 4 counties. The smell of victory was intoxicating, like breathing mountain air after years in a smoggy city. My restitution check went straight into the Uncle Mortimer Memorial Scholarship for trade school students, ensuring future generations would learn the honest skills that build strong communities. Crystal Lake's transformation was miraculous. Where Delilah's mansion once poisoned our shoreline, native wildflowers now bloom in protected wetland habitat. The sound of children's laughter has replaced the roar of her BMW engine. Water quality improved so dramatically that fish populations rebounded 40%, and bald eagles returned to nest in our oak trees for the first time in 20 years. Our tower became the crown jewel of community activism. At exactly 40 feet, it rises above every structure on the lake, its American flag visible from 5 miles away. The weather monitoring station provides data that protects our ecosystem, while the amateur radio repeater serves emergency communications across 5 counties. The birdwatching platform teaches thousands of children annually about conservation and the power of standing up for what's right. But the most beautiful transformation was personal. I met Eleanor Walsh, a widow from Pine Lake who'd supported our fight against her own developer harassment. Our shared battle scars from fighting corruption blossomed into love, and we married last spring on the tower platform with the entire community celebrating below. The taste of wedding cake mixed with lake breeze while Uncle Mortimer's flag blessed our union from 40 feet above. The tower attracts 15,000 tourists yearly, each one learning that ordinary people can achieve extraordinary justice when they work together. Wellington's legal clinic has helped over 400 families fight similar schemes. Our documentary Tower of Justice won regional Emmy recognition and is now required viewing in law schools teaching grassroots organizing. Michigan's Thaddeus law requires HOA financial transparency and democratic oversight, preventing future property predators from terrorizing homeowners. 3 other states adopted similar protections, and congressional hearings are examining federal legislation against HOA abuse nationwide. Every sunrise, I climb 40 feet to watch golden light paint our restored lake, just like Uncle Mortimer used to describe. The view shows clean water reflecting endless sky, shorelines green with native plants, and a community that learned democracy's most important lesson. When good people stand together, corruption always loses. The guest book in our tower's equipment shed contains over 10,000 signatures from visitors inspired by our story. Sometimes the best view comes from standing up to those who try to block it. I carved those words into the platform's main beam, and they capture everything Uncle Mortimer died trying to teach us. The Crystal Lake Conservation Foundation, funded by documentary profits and merchandise sales, provides legal defense for communities fighting property fraud while sponsoring environmental education at 50 schools annually. We maintain the tower as a free public facility, proving that justice belongs to everyone willing to climb high enough to see it clearly. Speaking of climbing, Wellington's legal clinic just received an urgent call from Sunset Shores Lake community, where a new HOA president is demanding $50,000 dock improvement assessments from elderly residents. The pattern sounds familiar: property manipulation, intimidation tactics, suspicious buyout offers. I've agreed to visit next week and share our tower construction expertise because the fight for property rights never ends. But that's a story for another day. If you've survived your own HOA nightmare, drop your story in the comments below. Let's expose these property predators together and build an army of informed homeowners ready to fight back. Hit subscribe and ring that notification bell for Karen's stories, because we're building a community of justice warriors, and your voice makes us stronger. From 40 feet up, the view of victory is absolutely magnificent.